Every year, students come through our sleep labs to do their clinicals. During their clinicals, we're training them on how to do the actual job, how to take care of patients, and how to read the EEGs, but they're also free to ask questions. A common question that I get is, how do I balance my life with working nights? In sleep school, they're given some advice, and we'll talk about that advice, but it tends to be different from what most people in the field actually do. So, I figured this would be a good place to talk about some of the options you might have if you're considering working nights. Starting off, it's important to talk about why someone would even want to work nights in the first place. In some fields, it's completely unavoidable. For example, if there were no night shift positions, there would be a gap in the medical field. So sometimes, people who feel like they are naturally prone to staying up late, like myself, are more comfortable taking those positions and filling that gap. To those people, working nights will feel more peaceful, more quiet, and give time to introspect. Another thing that appealed to me, and many others, is the pay. Working nights tends to pay more for doing the same job than it would if you were working days. And then we also have to consider the schedule. Some people consider working 3 12-hour shifts much better than working 5 8-hour shifts. Now, if your job has you working 4 10-hour night shifts, I can't tell you how to live your life, but I've done that before, and I would highly recommend that you find another place to work. These benefits come with a cost. It's called the graveyard shift for a reason. And we do have to ask ourselves, what can we really expect from going against our body's natural circadian rhythm? As far as I could tell, there has not ever been a civilization or a culture where people are nocturnal. And I completely understand. You might feel like you function better at nights, that you're nocturnal, or that you're not a morning person. I would say the same thing about myself. But that doesn't change the fact that humans are just not nocturnal creatures. According to the CDC, working nights can put people at a higher risk for cardiovascular disease, cancer, miscarriages, and depression. So we might hear of these problems that working nights can contribute to, and we might ask, why is this happening? If I'm getting my full 8 hours of sleep, yeah, it's during the day, but what's the difference? People on the other side of the world are going to sleep at the same time I am, so why is this a problem? And that's a fair point. It would be difficult, but you could negate almost all of the issues that come with sleeping during the day. If you did things perfectly, you could probably stay on a nocturnal shift and your body wouldn't be able to tell the difference. As far as it's concerned, you're not different from the person on the opposite end of the world from you who just happens to not get a lot of sunlight. So that's probably not the source of the problem. The root of the problem is probably that people end up on a rotating schedule. They sleep during the day sometimes, and they sleep during the night other times. Most night shift workers almost always end up fighting their circadian rhythm, and after a while, that takes a toll on the body. So if you're thinking of working nights, how can you avoid a rotating schedule and negate the damage that working nights is doing to your body? I'll give you the official answer. This is the answer that my teacher gave to me. You're going to have to commit. You have to flip your schedule and live your life at night. Even when you're off from work, you're going to have to continue sleeping during the day and living your life during the evenings and the night. That doesn't sound too bad, right? I mean, yeah, you won't really see your friends that often, and you'll have to shop at places that are open 24/7. You'll probably have to find a gym that's open 24/7. And you'll need to be comfortable walking your dog at night. You'll have to only spend time with your family when they're awake for about 5 or 6 hours before they go to sleep. You have to buy some blackout curtains. You see how this isn't feasible for the majority of people? But this is the official advice that's given. And it makes sense. Going back to our earlier argument, our bodies don't really know what time it is. If you play things very carefully, really dodged the sun, and had a well-lit house at night, your body wouldn't know that you were doing anything differently. You might have to supplement some vitamin D, but as long as you're getting a healthy amount of sleep, you wouldn't be very different from someone who lived on the opposite side of the world who just didn't get a lot of sunlight exposure. Okay, so let's try to actually follow the advice. What would that look like? You finish your shift, and now you have 4 nights off. First, we need to identify our biggest enemy, and that's the sun. The sun plays a large role in helping our bodies to know when to go to sleep and when to wake up. So this is going to make the morning after work very difficult. You need to dodge as much sunlight as possible. If you can even make it home before the sun comes up, that would be the best case scenario. More than likely, that's not going to happen though. At most, I was able to do that during certain times of the year when I lived very close to where I work. So, realistically, all you can do is wear sunglasses and try to cover up. When sunlight hits the skin, when it hits the eyes, it can lower the melatonin that our body produces, and that's very important to helping us go to sleep and stay asleep. Now, once you are home, you want to keep the building as dark, as quiet, and as cold as possible. If you have children, a spouse, roommates, whatever, they need to respect that you're going to sleep and they need to try to be as quiet as they can. I'd recommend blacking out your windows. For me, I found some success when I bought 2 different types of blackout curtains. I would layer them on top of each other, and at some point I even taped the sides and the edges to keep the sun from coming in. Any amount of sunlight, I always notice it. Depending on how tired you are, you might notice it too. So that could be an option for you. Another option, might be easier, might be worse, would be a sleep mask. I haven't really explored the fancier ones. I just bought one from Walmart. It always ends up falling off of my face, but it's normally enough to keep the sun out of my eyes while I'm going to sleep, so it tends to be okay. I'm sure some of the more expensive ones are better, but that's up to you on if you want to explore them. Some people have a problem sleeping when something's covering their face, so this might not be a better option than blackout curtains. I'd also recommend wearing earplugs, especially if your neighbor has a dog named Bobo who barks because they have anxiety because they don't go outside enough. Some issues you might run into with earplugs are that they might be irritating to you, or they might just fall out of your ears. They could also work too well. If you have alarms that you need to hear, or if you have somebody delivering something or whatever, if they work too well and you don't hear it, that can be a problem. Good. You fell asleep, you woke up feeling rested, that's a success. If there's still sunlight out, I would recommend that now's the time to go out, do some cardio, go jogging, go walking, whatever. Get some sunlight exposure, get your heart rate up, that's a good time for it. More than likely, you have 14, maybe 16 hours to do what you want. But if socializing is part of your plan, you really only have 5 to 6 hours before your family and friends go to sleep. You're also going to have about the same amount of time before stores and restaurants start to close down. If you're physically active, and you should be, I would recommend that you go to a gym that's open 24/7, or that you have a home gym. Because you're going to be so limited on the amount of time you can spend with your friends and family, you want to make sure that you can train as late as possible, so that way it doesn't conflict. During your waking hours, you're going to run into the opposite problem that you had in the morning. You're going to want to replicate the sun as best as possible. Lumens are how we measure light. You're going to want to start paying attention to that. It's labeled on the light bulbs that we buy, and you want to try to buy light bulbs that are going to be on the higher end of that. The same rules for caffeine are going to apply to you, just like they would for a person who's awake during the day. Try to cut caffeine off about 6 hours before you go back to sleep. If you're considering working nights, this is the advice that's given. I hope that this lifestyle is something that you can maintain, but you can probably see how this doesn't work for most people. This isn't a 1 or 2 day thing, this is your life. This would be your life 7 days out of the week, 365 days a year. Every time you slip up, you go out during the day, you schedule a doctor's appointment, you're throwing your sleep schedule off, and you're basically dealing with jet lag. And that's the thing. At some point, you will have commitments during the day. And the people around you are going to think that you're extra available because you're the friend who only works 3 days a week. And honestly, you're probably going to feel the same way at first. When you first start out, it's really not that difficult to stay up during the day. It doesn't feel pleasant, but it does let you feel productive. And that's how most people end up on a rotating schedule. Your body gets used to being on one schedule for part of the week, and then you flip to something else. You end up fighting your circadian rhythm, and then your body suffers the consequences. Okay, so you couldn't fully commit to being nocturnal for the rest of your life. That's fair. But now you're doing exactly what you were told not to do, and the thought of a heart attack is creeping around the corners of your mind. What can you do now? Well, the CDC recommends regular checkups with your primary care physician. They recommend exercising and eating nutritious meals. Obviously, I agree with this advice, but it does feel like a band-aid to me. I want to make it clear that I do advocate that everyone do these things. Everyone should be exercising and eating as healthy as they can. But for night shift workers specifically, that doesn't really solve the problem. Even if you are doing these things, you have an irregular sleep schedule. You're always going to be less healthy than you would have been if you just had a normal daily life. So what should you do? All I can tell you is what I've done and what some of my coworkers have done. This is not medical advice. I'm not sure if this is the healthiest way to do night shift. There might be a much better alternative. So the healthiest option is going to be to quit. Obviously, that's not going to work for everyone. For some jobs, it's essential that people work nights. But I don't know a better way to put it. If you value your health, you can't be the person working nights for your entire life. You're going to have to weigh the pros and cons. At some point, if you can get a day shift position, that would probably be the best solution. This solution is probably not going to be your immediate option. You can't quit your job and then starve to death. That's not really a solution. But at the same time, you don't want to wake up 20 years from now and realize that you could have been doing something else. You could have been a little healthier, and you just never really thought of an alternative. So start planning ahead now. To that point, we might wonder, how much time do we have before I've been working nights too long? From what I've seen, lingering effects of working the graveyard shift start to appear after about a decade of working. This is when I've noticed that my coworkers have started taking sleeping aids so that way they can sleep during the day and sleep when they're off from work. And people who quit the nights and go to days tend to have trouble falling asleep or some other lingering effects. That said, I don't think any of the effects are permanent. Besides quitting, we can look at the actual schedule that you're working. Some jobs have people working a rotating schedule on purpose. So 1 week or 2 weeks they'll be working nights, and then 2 weeks after that they'll be working days. I'd recommend trying to get a consistent schedule. If you're going to be on days, be on days. If you're going to be on nights, be on nights. But on the other hand, if you have to do that rotating schedule, maybe talk to your boss and see if you can be on one shift for as long as possible. So a month of nights and then followed by a month of days might be better than 1 week of nights and 1 week of days. That said, I don't have personal experience with this. Any jobs that require that, I've always just not applied. So this also might not apply to very many jobs. I'm kind of thinking this might be like a firewatch or an oil rig worker type of thing. So this might not be relevant to most night shift workers. Now, if you're working exclusively night shift, I'd recommend that you dial your nights back. I'm not entirely sure if it makes a difference, but I would guess that working 2 nights a week is better than working 3 nights a week. And like I said, if you're working 4 nights a week, you should really look into dialing that back to at most 3. I've done 4/10s. It's horrible for my health, mental health. It sucks. Don't do it if you don't have to. It does seem like 3 nights a week is the standard night shift work week. I've heard that the 4-day work week is being thrown around for day shift workers. So maybe a 2-night work week for night shift workers would be fair. Maybe we should throw that out there and see what happens. Until that happens, check to see if you can get a part-time position with your job. Most part-time positions for night shifts are 2 nights a week. And for most employers, it seems like they still offer benefits and insurance and all that stuff. So that might be the better option. There'd be a pay cut. That's something you have to determine for yourself. But that probably is better than 3 nights a week for your health. Continuing on with the schedule, it might also matter how we arrange the nights that we work. In general, it's probably best that you consolidate your nights as much as possible. A schedule like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is probably better than a schedule like Sunday, Tuesday, Friday. Now that said, I almost always have worked a split schedule. I've tried to avoid things like Sunday, Tuesday, Friday, but I have done Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And for me, that break in between really seems to help me. But I also know that when I do work 3 nights back to back, even though it feels like I'm at work for a very long time, once I have my days off, I tend to feel better for longer. So let's say you work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Now, what's the best way to transition from your night shift to your daily life? I've heard lots of different things. What I've personally found success with is aggressively flipping my schedule as quickly as possible. So let's say I'm working Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. What I'm going to do going into Saturday night, I'm going to stay up as late as possible. I'm going to do my best to sleep as long as possible on Sunday. And if I have to, if I can, I'll take a nap before work Sunday. That normally gets me ready for Sunday night. I normally don't feel tired, not too tired, and I'm able to get through the night. From then on, it's just sleeping during the day, working at night, sleeping during the day, working at night. Now, the difficult part is the morning after my final shift. So what I normally try to do, Wednesday morning, I would sleep until about noon, and then I would wake up and stay awake for the entire day. I personally would try to go to sleep like normal and wake up around noon and stay awake for the rest of the day. If I did it right, I'd fall asleep at a normal time and flip back to my normal schedule for the rest of my time off. I did run into some problems doing this. The first night back was always difficult, and it wasn't uncommon for me to wake up around 2 in the morning and not be able to go back to sleep. And this would make sleeping for the rest of my time off weird, difficult. Another option is to stay up the entire day after your last shift. I don't do that very often. It sucks a lot, and I don't feel very productive. I can't really do much of anything. I'm a zombie. But I have heard that it helps you flip back to a normal schedule very quickly. And then what I'm currently doing right now is I just sleep like normal. I just sleep through the day and I wake up maybe 1 hour or 2 hours before I normally would if I was working that night. At this point in my life, I'm so tired that I can still go back to sleep at a normal time and sleep throughout the night. I'll say that this intense sleepiness, where I can sleep for basically 16 hours in 2 separate periods, that's new to me. That's probably just due to my lifestyle and how long I've been working nights. It's probably not good. Whatever schedule or timing you use, just make sure that you are sleeping well. Remember that your hormones are not optimized to help you sleep during the day. So we can do some of the things that we mentioned earlier, like buy blackout curtains, wear earplugs, those sorts of things to help sleep the best we can during the day. Working out while working nights is going to be difficult. I've had varying levels of success throughout my career, and of course, at the end of the day, it always comes down to commitment, and it's just going to be harder for you if you work nights. Personally, I try to train on my off days. Cardio is almost exclusively done only on the days that I'm off, or if I have to do it on a night where I'm working, I will do it before work, not before I go to sleep. For me personally, it seemed like it could affect how well I slept. I think this is very individual. You should maybe test it out, see if it affects you. I believe this is a personal thing that you probably are going to have to play around with. Everyone's different. Depending on whatever split I'm following, resistance training can vary. I try to do that on my off days, but I also found that I can do those after work before I go to sleep, and it doesn't really seem to affect how well I sleep. The longer I've been doing this, the harder that's become. I feel very nauseous if I'm trying to work out after work, a little woozy. It's just not very pleasant. So again, I try to train on my off days or after I wake up. If you're considering working the schedule, make sure that you weigh the pros and the cons. There are situations where working nights are your only option, or it might be the only schedule that you want to work. That's fair too. So do what you can to be healthy. Try to consolidate your nights and make sure that you're really paying attention to your diet, your exercise, and your doctor visits.